world where, as Michael Porter once imagined, business don't just compete, but create shared value, which means that profit and purpose unite. That's the heart of strategic corporate social responsibility, or CSR, a concept that's changing the way of how multinational enterprises, or MNEs, operate in our globalized landscape. Let me tell you an example. Imagine a firm that is facing global disapproval for its environmental footprint. What I mean with this is, for example, is having huge carbon emissions, and it's being pressured by voices from all around the world. For example, communities, investors, markets, so stakeholders. So the firm finally chooses to rethink the strategy, turning this challenge or problem into a competitive edge. By doing that, it helped the company have a much better reputation and a competitive advantage over other firms that are not addressing this environmental issue. That is strategic CSR in action. So strategic CSR is defined as voluntary actions made by the companies to enhance their competitiveness and reputation that will lead to improve their financial and economical performance by addressing sustainable and ecological or social responsibilities into their core strategies. Focusing on sustainability, we can question ourselves. What is driving companies towards this approach? Why are they doing this? MNEs are under growing pressure from stakeholders, facing impacts where ecological sustainability could become the central challenge. If companies don't address this, they risk not just their reputation, but their long-term survival in a globalized economy. Globally, MNEs are now responding by integrating strategies like, for example, stakeholder collaboration to adopt sustainable practices. This is a huge global movement that is aligning companies' growth with the ecological balance, turning pressures into opportunities. To help companies make smart decisions, managers analyze business areas like accounting or organizational behavior to help balance financial goals with environmental responsibilities. But now the big question is, how can MNEs build strategies that are sustainable and responsible in this interconnected world? Now let's dive into a critical aspect of CSR, specifically environmental responsibility. Most people, including me in the past, might think that companies do it to actually and purely help the cause. But environmental responsibility in strategic CSR talks about companies that voluntarily integrate eco-friendly practices into their core business strategies. But now the question is, what do they gain by doing this? Well, they enhance their competitiveness and reputation on a global scale, while being benefit financially and socially. It's about firms constantly implementing strategies to address and contribute to ecological challenges, like climate change, for example. And this could mean adopting green technologies, reducing emissions, or improving resource efficiency. Now, all of these align with the stakeholder expectations. And what is the goal of doing that? To create shared value by benefiting the planet and the company itself. Because when using renewable energy, they can reduce costs and attract investors, turning sustainability into a strategic advantage. Now, let's look at a real-world example. In this case, the strategic CSR was on a country scale, and this was when China's power industry started targeting SO2 and CO2 emissions from 2006 to 2019. The context of the problem was China, which was the world's largest carbon emitter. They face global pressure to reduce emissions, with its power sector having nearly 50% of national total carbon emissions in 2006 to 38% in 2020. This was caused mainly because of the rapid industrialization that relied and nowadays still relies on, but there's more regulations in coal, causing high SO2 levels and environmental degradation. The Chinese government, through the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China and the State Council, established a strategy in the 11th and 12th five-year plan to reduce SO2 in a 10% from 2006 to 2010 and an additional 8% from 2011 to 2015 by pushing power companies to adopt flue gas desulfurization, which was totally enhancing the industry's global reputation with these corporate level decisions by attracting national and international investors into the power sector. At the business level, firms like those in Shanghai implemented these government regulations for their own benefits and standards of emission control, focusing on competitive advantage, reducing operational costs, and improving market share in a growing green economy. The impact was significant. According to the International Journal of Climate Change Strategies and Management, many cities reduced their normalized unit of carbon emissions. For example, Shanghai from 1,024 to 320 by 2019, Sichuan from 1,094 to 268, or Qinghai from 1,900 to 518, thanks to this strategy. This not only cleaned the air, but also boosted the efficiency of companies and improved their global reputation. Now, this example highlights how strategic CSR applied to corporate and business level decisions can transform a whole industry by joining environmental responsibility into strategy. China's power sector, for example, turned a huge problem into an opportunity, proving that sustainability and profitability can go hand in hand.
That's a great example means when sustainability and strategy truly work together. Today, many companies love to talk about sustainability, but not all of them work. Some focus more on looking green rather than being green. That's what we call greenwash. When a company promotes a green image, but its action tell another story. At the business and functional levels, many multinational enterprises set big carbon goals and publish CSR reports. They talk about going net zero and protecting the planet and leading the green transition. But when we look at the numbers behind those reports, the reliable is not so optimistic. Let's take BP for example. You may know the slogan Beyond Petroleum. It sounds like a clean energy company, right? In the public reports, BP presents itself as investing heavily in renewables and supporting a greener future. But BP's 2024 annual report shows another story. In 2024, around 60 to 65% of BP's investment still went into oil and gas operations, while less than 5% supported low carbon energy such as hydrogen and renewables. Even more surprising, BP's carbon emissions increased from 32 million to 33.6 million tons of carbon dioxide, up nearly 5%. Financially, BP's profit dropped sharply from $15 billion in 2023 to just $0.38 billion in 2024, a decrease of almost 97%. Even with low profits and pressure to change, The company still pour most of its resources into traditional energy instead of renewables. This shows a strategic misalignment, a gap between what the corporate headquarters promises and what happens at the business and functional levels. The corporate strategy talk about transformation, but actions work another way. Adversely, it damages the company's credibility, weakens stakeholder trust, and slows down progress towards sustainability. Investors and customers start to question whether the company cares, and employees may lose motivation when they see green promises that never turn into action. BP is not alone. In many industries, we see similar partners. Companies make public commitments to sustainability, but fail to redesign their supply chains, production systems, or energy use. CSR become just a label, not leadership. It becomes part of marketing, not part of strategy. So, to be sustainable on levels of multinational enterprises, the corporate level, the business level, and the functional level must move in the same direction. From this, CSR can truly create value and competitive advantage. Next, my teammate Lokesh will continue this discussion by showing what happened. With that, misalignment continues. When with responsibility and the operational level leads not only to reputation loss, but also to serious ethic and environment damage.
Hello everyone. After hearing Shen's talk about how companies sometimes only pretend to care about the environment, I want to focus what really happens when companies do not practice responsible production. First, let's talk about the problem. When companies don't make things in a responsible way, it hurts nature and people. Factories can pollute the air and water, cut down too many trees, use lots of energy and resources. This means dirtier water, less clean air, too much trash, and animals losing their home. People who live near the factories often get more sick. Companies also lose trust in the process, and governments can fine them a lot of money. For example, as my friend said, Bharat Petroleum wants to go green, but numbers in 2024 showed that they spend most of their money in oil and gas products. Their pollution actually went up by 5%, that is like 36 million tons in 1 year. So, ignoring responsible production is bad for everyone, including the business. Second, what are the real effects? The actions speed up the problems like climate change and droughts, spoil the land, and put people's health at risk. It makes it hard for animals and plants to survive. People lose jobs and have to move away because the land and water isn't safe anymore. Customers and investors stop trusting companies when they realize they can't actually keep their promises. Finally, how can responsible production help us? When companies choose to make their products in a better way, like using less energy and less water, recycled materials, and cutting down on pollution, that is when nature starts to heal. There's less waste and more cleaner air. It also helps the business, people respect it more and buy its product, and the company might spend less money fixing things when something goes wrong. Responsible production means being honest, showing real results, and working towards a better future. Now, some of you might think if it's really possible. Now, let me tell you about a company that made it possible, which is Interface Inc. In 1996, founder of Interface Inc., Mr. Ray Anderson, wanted to have zero effect on environment by 2020, so they started Mission Zero program. They then switched to using recycled materials, also switched to 89% of renewable energy. And the result, they cut down the waste by 93%, carbon pollution dropped by 68%, and water use fell by almost 90%. These numbers show how good responsible production can be. Let's look at how Interface made this happen step by step at every level. First, at the corporate level. Interface's leaders set a huge goal, which is Mission Zero for the entire company. This vision shaped every decision, investment, and public statement. When leaders commit so clearly, it turns into a purpose. Second, at the business level, Interface redesigned its key products and introduced new manufacturing processes. They went beyond compliance and set tough targets for cutting down pollution using greener materials and rethinking what exactly quality means in their industry. This helped them gain more customers and beat competitors by being truly sustainable. Third, at the business function level, which is the daily routines. Teams in factories used clean electricity. Engineers found smarter ways to recycle nylon, and supply chain managers worked with suppliers to find lower carbon raw materials. Real progress came from thousands of small improvements tracked and measured clearly to keep everyone focused on ultimate goal. Interface reached Mission Zero ahead of its schedule. Their products are now carbon neutral, employees take pride, customers trust them more, and they continue pushing for even greater impact each year. So, Interface's journey proves that successful responsible production is possible when companies set bold goals, act across every part of the business, and measure progress closely. When strategy becomes teamwork, real change happens, and both our planet and communities benefit. Thank you.